of sharing durian ASEAN.
ASEAN Dailies. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Durian ASEAN. You are with Grace at ASEAN Dailies. Well, we deliver news and also comment on and also discuss about all those news from Southeast Asia. Well, let's focus on haze, and it's currently again the one of the big issues in Southeast Asia, especially Indonesia, Singapore, and Malaysia. So this thick haze, which has been there, started a few days ago again, which is believed to be caused by the forest fires in Indonesia, of course. Now, it blanks the whole skies in the city and some parts of Mindanao as well. So the haze is usually formed by this accumulation of smoke and the particles like dust in the air. And this is getting worse and worse. And this smoke is actually up in the sky and there will be no health risk. Well, this is according to the Indonesian part. However, when it comes to Malaysia, few schools are already closed, especially to prevent all those children from affecting their health, as well as to especially to disturb the whole school system. So we said we'll see how it goes like before, but then this is getting serious, and of course countries have been showing their dissatisfaction towards the oldest policies and the solution over this haze problem for the past a few weeks already. So there really needs to be something done towards this haze problem. Well, but then let's also move on to other areas which we can stay in the Philippines, especially the northern part of Philippines where there was a typhoon and also it's been going on for some time. So this typhoon has slightly lost its strength, but it also has destroyed and also damaged a few parts in the northern area of the Philippines. So like I mentioned, the northern and the central Luzon will feel the wrath of typhoon, which is also called Lando, international name, for 3 more days. And it is moving slowly, of course. It's a bad news because it's going to stay longer, which means for the next 3 days, well, it will be over the north and also perhaps going to the central Luzon as well. And this storm warning signals remained over the Metro Manila and also surrounding provinces as well. So of course, we expected that the weather will improve somewhere today or tomorrow, but this slowed down. So they are still in the signal number 2. So a lot of the people have been affected by this typhoon. And also, it is also maintained at signal number 2 over Metro Manila, Gayangan, including the Calayan, and also Baduyan Island as well. So a few other provinces in the Philippines. So about this 600-kilometer diameter typhoon will continue to bring this moderate to heavy to occasionally about intense rain over this Luzon province for the next 3 days. So this typhoon, which is also called Koppu, of course, it has a sort of impacted the whole northern area of the Philippines. So hopefully, at least there will be some helping hands as well as a more sort of a policies to overcome this issue, because when it comes to Philippines, typhoon is not something new, especially when it comes to weather broadcaster. So we will deliver the more news from Southeast Asia. We'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll deliver news on the political side of Southeast Asia. So stay tuned.
Voice of sharing durian ASEAN.
ASEAN Dailies. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hey, good morning. This is Arlene.
Welcome back. This is Grace.
So earlier on, you had some of our updates on what is happening on Southeast Asia. Moving on to politics. So right now in Aceh, a couple of churches were being demolished after deadly unrest.
Well, the authorities in Indonesia's conservative Aceh province, which was on Monday, they began to tearing down several small Christian churches after hardline Muslims demanded their closure, citing a lack of building permits and following religious violence. So having these churches demolished in that area particularly, it's pretty sensitive. And then, of course, the Indonesian security forces, they tore down these churches in Aceh. And they, of course, all those Muslim community, and when you talk about Muslim community and a Christian community in Indonesia, again, this is not the first incident, but then also it looks like all this government, or perhaps the security officers, they do sort of move forward to act on to demolish all these churches in Aceh.
But it's really sad that the government is the one doing the dirty job, I would say, because the local government security officers, instead of protecting either the churches or the people, the Christians, they actually use those sledgehammers to raise 2 small Protestant churches and 1 Catholic church. It's just a group of modest buildings with woods, concrete and tin, but the thing is, just because they don't have permit, which is just a minor issue if you look at it, they shouldn't have just suddenly tore down. It's because it's a place of worship. It's not just another house, So I really do not understand. But it reminds me of what happened in Malaysia a couple of years ago, where a couple of Hindu temples were also being demolished under the reason that it was on the private land, that it has no permit to be there. But I feel that when it comes to places of worship, authorities have to be a bit more sensitive to the feelings of the local communities and not just, suddenly demolish it under the pretext that it has no permit.
Well, but when it comes to Indonesia, of course, Indonesia do practice Muslim most of parts Indonesia. But however, even though the Christian, the religion itself is still minority, it needs to be protected because it's part of a religion. And then, like you mentioned before, rather than respecting each other, it's more like attacking each other in certain areas in Indonesia. And it is indeed very sad news. And it also brings a very bad reputation when it comes to religion, community, especially Christianity.
It does bring really bad news to the people there. Aceh itself is an independent province that is self-governed by the authority there, who is practicing a more hard-lined Sharia regulation in recent years. But this kind of activities only give bad news, not just to Aceh, but also to Islam in general. People would assume that if Islam is being adopted in a country, that means minorities' rights are not being protected. And I don't think that that's the direction that majority of the Muslim wants to adhere. So I think it's important that the authorities in Aceh set up committees to be more sensitive of minority rights in this case. So moving on, also in Indonesia, so mixed report cards on Indonesia's president's first year in the office. I can't believe it's already been a year that Joko Widodo has been in the office.
Yes, that's correct. And Joko Widodo was hailed as the people's choice, of course, and he became the first Indonesian president not to have come from the country's political party, but it was mostly from the public side. And now it marks the first year, and then of course all this there are mixed report card on in his first year in the office, and of course there are some feedbacks from different parts of society from Indonesia, and some of them actually mentioned, I feel there aren't too many changes apparently, and maybe because it has just been 1 year, but I don't feel much of that impact. So some people, they really want to see the change, especially when they did vote for this particular person in Indonesia.
Actually, to be fair, Joko Joko Widodo has been busy in terms of creating more economic deals, getting more investment in. But the problem is Indonesia is starting from the bottom, and their economy is not doing very well. It's only slowly picking up. So it takes time for Jokowi to see his his trees to bear fruits. But on the other hand, I would say that Jokowi is a people's president. If you see how much he loves rock music, in fact, Abdi Negara, the guitarist of the rock band Slang, is one of the many celebrities who has supported Joko Widodo's election campaign. In fact, he organized a mega concert at the Gelora Bung Karno Stadium in South Jakarta when he was contending as the president. So there you go. I think Joko Widodo is still very much a popular president in Indonesia, especially among the younger generation. But you're right, when it comes to the impact, especially economic impact, it's still not yet to be felt.
Well, it's good news, still a good news that we can see that there are hopes from Joko Widodo from the public. And then they said it's just been a year, so we hope that Joko Widodo can do something more and better for the society as well as for the country. But in fact, what we can see from his work so far, he has reduced the fuel subsidies, made cabinet changes, and he also introduced the economic reforms without facing opposition in the parliament. So those are the few milestones that he has built so far.
In terms of human rights, he's not doing very well, as you can see the recent execution of the Bali Nai. Death penalty. He's a strong proponent of death penalty, so that's not really doing very well with the human rights activists in Indonesia. In terms of international relations, even under Jokowi, the relationship between Australia and Indonesia is still strained. So it's still a long way to go when it comes to Joko Widodo's appeal in the international scene. But I can say that in Malaysia, a lot of people are actually quite excited with Joko Widodo. They see him as a role model as what Malaysia's leaders could have been. So moving on to another news about Myanmar, we talk about the Christian minorities in Indonesia's Aceh being marginalized in a way. The same thing happening in Myanmar. Muslim from violence torn Rakhine, they are voicing support for Myanmar's Aung San Suu Kyi. They see her as the only platform for them to be able to gain human rights.
Well, this campaign ahead of what is billed as Myanmar's first free and fair election in 25 years, of course, which will be held very soon. It has seen a spike in tension stoked by anti-Muslim hardline Buddhist group Mabata, which has sharply criticized the NLD, which is the Party National League for Democracy. So just the last week, Suu Kyi spoke in Tanway, where about 2 years ago in October, 5 common Muslims were murdered during the flare-up and religious violence. So in fact, the many Muslim residents from that area and also surrounding villages who came to see her said they still support her, and they also hoped that this party would help to end their discrimination and also foster reconciliation between the Buddhists and the Muslims. It looks like the tension between the Buddhists and the Muslims is still there, and the people really hoped for the better change and also to have a better, perhaps the sort of regulation when it comes to these two tensions. However, people are still hoping for the even the minor change when it comes to religions. And according to them, they say, of course, they don't have equal rights, but they hope that if she can win the election, perhaps we can receive equal rights here.
What is interesting is, unlike the marginalized Rohingya Muslim, those who is also living in the Rakhine state, the Kaman minority groups from Tadwe, one of the Myanmar's 135 recognized ethnic groups. The Rohingya live predominantly in Sittwe and northern Rakhine, where 140,000 of them were displaced by violence in 2012. But also interesting point I want to highlight that Aung San Suu Kyi will not visit Sittwe or northern parts of Rakhine during her 3-day trip through the western state. In fact, the Nobel Peace Laureate has been criticized for saying little about the Rohingyas' plight, and I think it's a political move for her to try to distance herself from the Rakhine people, specifically the people in Sittwe, who are mostly the Rohingya Muslim. But I can see that hopefully, with the support of the Rohingya, she would be able to, if she ever to become president, she would be able to help them to get out from their plights. So anyway, from Myanmar, we move on to economy, but we'll take 2 short breaks of music breaks, and we will continue our discussion on TPP as well as something is happening in Vietnam right now.
ASEAN Dailies. First and the foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Good morning, this is Arlene, you're back with me.
Welcome back, this is Grace.
And of course, on our economic news, the biggest news of this month is definitely on the TPP. And there were a lot of analysis on the TPP, whether it will benefit countries that are part of the signees or those who have agreed to be part of it. And of course, one of the countries is Vietnam. Mm-hmm. And we are looking at Vietnam, and there are a lot of different news that say that whether Vietnam is will be the biggest benefactor or maybe the biggest loser for the TPP. Let's look at the biggest benefactor. It seems like with the TPP under Vietnam's belt, Vietnam will see much more expansion in terms of their manufacturing goods. In fact, you will see more goods labeled made in Vietnam.
Yes, of course, they said there will be ups and downside. Apparently, a potential downside they were talking about, it will be higher labor cost and also strained production at the country factories. And then, of course, from there, all the costs will go up, and definitely will bring a sort of hard time for everybody to get at the capacity. With the TPP, especially to Vietnam, it's got the potential when it comes to the business side and also to Vietnamese manufacturers. But then they are also worried about all this potential downside from TPP.
As we all know, China is currently the factory hub of the world. Like literally everything that you buy is made in China. But with the TPP, it seems like maybe probably more than half of what you buy might be made in Vietnam. It is a great thing to see that Vietnam is trying to conquer the manufacturing industry. But at the same time, are they able to do so? Are they prepared to do so? There's this one article on the Wall Street Journal that even though Vietnam is poised to be the biggest beneficiary of the 12-nation pact of the TPP, but for the country's manufacturers, there is a lot of downside. One of it is, are they able to keep up with the production?
Right.
And that's one of the things. And also, of course, with the higher labor costs and strained production of the country's factories, are they able to make the business sustainable? That's one of the questions that needs to be answered. Over the past decade, manufacturing labor costs in Vietnam has more than tripled to 1.96 an hour US dollar, including benefits. Although costs are still much less than China's 3.27 US dollar an hour, and the US is 37.96 US dollar an hour, according to the Economics Intelligence Unit. So definitely Vietnam is the best choice for any manufacturer who wants to manufacture any goods, because it's much more cheaper. But at the same time, they might not be able to keep up with the production.
Yes, production when it comes to the efficiency and also productivity of the industry, of course it will affect and also whether they will be able to catch up all this progressive the work they will be doing in the future. However, the Vietnamese government estimates that TPP, this agreement, can boost the Vietnam's economy by $33.5 billion during the next decade, and also it will make the fifth of the country's current gross domestic products. Exports from the key garments, footwear industry, which is one of the biggest TPP beneficiaries, they can actually jump 46% to $165 billion by 2025 as tariffs gradually fall to zero. So these are all those positive sides. But like you mentioned, Arlene, before about the productivity and the production side, that's again the big question here.
And not to mention the technology know-how. As we all know, Vietnam is not moving any faster because factories in the country still lack the know-how to manufacture a sophisticated jacket or shirt. So they can only manufacture those kind of low-level quality shirt or footwear or anything that, or even textile garments. So in other words, they are not moving up the value chain. They are just replacing China as the low level manufacturing chain, but not the higher value ones. And I think in this world, what is being appreciated more is to be the higher level sort of manufacturer hub. So that's the focus that Vietnam should focus on instead.
Well, that is also true. But then when you compare China and Vietnam, the economic status and also the progressiveness, perhaps what China took 30 years to make it happen, perhaps in Vietnam it could just happen in perhaps 10 or more than 15 years. So that means that's why more companies are coming to Vietnam for investment and also to make business there. So there are still hopes, and especially the skills of Vietnamese workers are increasing exponentially every year, and also country itself is able to accommodate even more and ever more complex production. So yes, we mentioned about how perhaps the efficiency and the productivity when it comes to production, but then because of the skilled labors, they're increasing in terms of their skills and the productivity by among themselves. We can still hope the Vietnamese can catch up.
And on the other hand, another country that is busy getting in the TPP, but they are still not quite there yet, is Taiwan. Taiwan cabinet ministers is finally setting the stage for TPP debate. In fact, the economic minister and council of agriculture minister on Wednesday laid bare the predicament concerning the Tony pork import issue that Taiwan faces in joining a regional trade pact spearheaded by the US. They said that Taiwan must make the decision as soon as possible or whether to relax the regulation to allow the import of US pork products containing the leanness enhancing drug ractopamine if the nation wants to join the negotiation table of the TPP. Oh, I didn't know that. In the US, they use a lot of chemicals to enhance their pork production. So yeah. In addition to this heavy presence of pork in the Taiwanese diet, the import of the pork products also has a larger impact on the local agriculture industry that consists of the much higher proportion of pig farmers than the cattle farmers. So the consumption of consumption of pork in Taiwan, it's pretty high in general. And of course, legislator Lee Kuang-min, he cited the projection by the Ministry of Economic Affairs that showed local farmers and related businesses stand to lose about $2 billion in output value and also around 16,000 jobs if Taiwan joins TPP. But in fact, Taiwanese government did show the interest to join TPP after it was firstly announced to the public. I think the biggest problem is the pork import issue. I think other than that, Taiwan is pretty open about other negotiation in the TPP trade pact. Anyway, we will take another short break. When we return, we'll talk more on the arts and culture of Southeast Asia.
ASEAN Dailies. First and foremost news from Southeast Asia.
Hey, I'm back. This is Arlene.
You're with Grace on ASEAN Dailies.
So on the arts and culture. So when it comes to ASEAN, the best way to expose young people about Southeast Asia is a boot camp on ASEAN.
Well, there is a youth trailblazer challenge. Stand a chance to be selected for this 2-day boot camp during the first ASEAN Entrepreneurship Summit next month.
Oh, that's amazing.
And yeah, and the priority is to getting on more Sarawakian youth on board. So, which is to have the inclusiveness when it comes to ASEAN. But the challenge is an initiative of Malaysian, all this association of, they need to focus on the bridging social, economic, and as well as the education gap between urban and rural youth. Because there is a definitely difference when it comes to urban education system as well as rural.
Definitely agree on that. And besides boot camp, another way to promote ASEAN to the younger generation is music. Called the ASEAN Music Extravaganza 2015, the cultural event was intended to cement ties between Malaysia and other fellow ASEAN member states. I think it's a great thing. I love when it comes to trying to create more understanding and celebrating music from diverse culture in Southeast Asia.
For sure, there were performances from all over Southeast Asia. So there was a notable performances came from Cambodia. They presented the dance featuring the 2 giant peacocks, and also they called the courting dance between these 2. Well-known the creature, as well as the accompanying music was mixed from the 2 different pieces, and also there was also Indonesian performance as well as Singapore performance as well. And when you look at this whole performance throughout, of course there was a combination of the traditional instruments as well as the modern the act here and there. So it is very good that Malaysia is showcasing different parts of performances from ASEAN. And in fact, from our country, we showcased a Sape legend, Leslie and Lee, who gave a hugely thrilling performance. And the Sape is very traditional instrument which really do represent Malaysia.
Yeah, it's actually a Borneo instrument, and it's great that they are bringing it back to the modern world. I think a lot of the younger generation are not really exposed to such cultural heritage. And of course, we also have Datuk Jamal Abdillah. She sang a couple of Malay songs. He is a legend on his own, definitely. And the concert was held in conjunction with the 90th Senior Officials Committee for the ASEAN Socio-cultural Community and the 14th ASEAN Socio-cultural Community Council meeting last week. Moving on to the last news of today, French writer for children inspires Vietnam readers. So Susie Morgenstern, a popular children's book writer in France, talked with readers on Monday at the French Cultural Center L'Espace in Vietnam.
Well, she's apparently a fan of social networking, the internet and smartphones, like many other people. But she really wants to give up on the habit of using social media, and she really didn't want all children to give up on the habit of reading books. So she came with these books, and she wants to write more books and attract more younger generations in Vietnam.
I'm glad that she is trying to expose a lot of really interesting work in Southeast Asia, especially in Vietnam. She has written about 100 books in English and French, mostly for children and teenagers. Her books have been translated into 30 different languages. Those have been translated into Vietnamese, including Secret Letters from 0 to 10, First Love, Last Love, and many more. So there you go. I I wish do they have a book being translated into Malay? I wish that she could have one. I'm sure it will spur
perhaps-
more
I
readership.
guess it depends on the readership in Malaysia, like you mentioned. If they really welcome her stories, I think we may translate into Malay as well.
The last time I heard, Malaysian read 2 pages a year. So
All right.
there you go. Anyway, thanks for listening to us. You can always follow us on our Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, and of course Facebook as well.
And we do have our website, drianasean.com, for more information and the contents, as well as when you're on the go, please download our app Drian ASEAN for more information.